I'm Bruce Wagner.
I'm Rennie Murez. Nice to see all of you.
Good to see you.
And we're sitting here and we're thinking, dreaming, and tending forward about the upcoming Mexico tour of 2018.
Yeah, Carlos Castaneda always said that this was before I traveled with him there, that the energy of Mexico City was very similar to the energy of Los Angeles, the Valley of Mexico and Los Angeles. We're calling from Los Angeles, and I'm feeling Mexico.
Yeah, totally. You can definitely feel Mexico from Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what were some of your? Because we're going on these tours, or we initiated these tours, because you and I and many of the apprentices that made individual trips with Carlos to Mexico.
Yeah, I remember, I was shocked to even meet Carlos Castaneda here in Los Angeles, and it was a number of years, maybe 5 years before I traveled with him to Mexico, which was another shock. I felt like I was inside one of his books. And Mexico immediately felt, I felt a kinship there, and what I was feeling was that timeless energy of that valley, and the lineage of Don Juan Matus, who was Carlos's teacher, and the mood, for me was extraordinary. It was magical, and unforgettable.
Yeah. No, I think I remember, and you probably remember this too, that Carlos would say the Valley of Mexico had that super high ceiling of consciousness. So that
dome.
Dome, it was different. It's like when you go to other cities, it's lower, but in Mexico, it's so high. It's almost like reaching to the heavens, and that's why all the pyramids are built so high. It's almost like the ancients intuited this reaching to the heavens, this reaching to the top of the dome so they could, touch the face.
I think in Los Angeles, I felt that I was getting close to dreaming. And in Mexico, I felt I was actually dreaming.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Los Angeles, I was stalking. Mexico, I was dreaming.
Yeah, totally. That's really cool.
So tell me a little bit about the last tour. I like that because it's like a Pink Floyd touring for the last time. It's like a rock group. And tell me why it's going to be the last tour, Rennie.
Well, like all things in Carlos's world, there's many layers and many ways of answering a single question. So from a personal point, it's like the last tour for me to go to Mexico and do these things. It's just got a finality. And as Carlos always says, most things in the sorcerer's world have the dualities pulled together and merge in the middle. So it's become this bittersweet, so gorgeous, so beautiful, and yet there's a little bit of longing and a little bit of angst mixed in it. So for me personally, it's going to be my last time. Then we've got last again because maybe the politics or something, the sites, that you and I visited with Carlos, whether they're the sites of Teotihuacan or the sites of Cacahuamilpa or these places, or Palenque.
The cave.
Yeah, the cave, or Palenque, they were intact. Meaning the artifacts of the people were still there. The tombs were still there. The palace things, all the friezes were still there. All the paintings were still there. Everything was there. What's happening now is that the Mexico government is allowing foreigners to come in and to excise these things and to keep them in their own private museums outside of Mexico. So I was talking just a couple months ago we're going to be going to Palenque in 2018. And the tour guide said, we can guarantee that Palenque will be what it looks like today for maybe one more year, but maybe in 2 years, it's going to be totally removed. It's going to be a mere shell. What's going to be there are the ruins, but nothing on the inside, nothing of the livelihood of the people. And it's those artifacts from the people that give those places this incredible energy, this groundedness, this energy.
The chacmuls are there as well.
Yeah, they have some chacmuls there.
And I remember I really didn't know much about anything, and I still don't. When I met Carlos Castaneda, he told me about these figures called the chacmuls, these massive, beautiful, very sober, timeless figures stone that one would look this way,
Yeah, totally.
and then 1,000 miles away, one would be returning the gaze.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was so poetic and so beautiful, and it became a kind of metaphor for my own gazing into the unknown.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And of course, the unknown was always gazing back my way.
Yeah, totally.
I wanted you to talk a little bit about the plumed serpent.
Yeah. Well, as a myth, as a story that drives civilizations, Mesoamerica is the only place in the world that honors or has the story of the plumed serpent. And what it is the story of very simple humanity. The plumed serpent is like a serpent with wings, with feathers, and so the serpent that flies. But then for humanity, what that means is the very simple human flesh of humanity. If a human being is to make choice decisions by his own, how do you say, his consciousness, by his own decision-making processes, he's going to change his life. He's going to become a little more ethereal, maybe not so petty, then he can take flight. He can become luminous light at the end of his life, but he can't become godlike. He's not going to become something that still honors another god, a higher god. He is going to become godlike himself. And he has these abilities, which we read about, and which Carlos explained to us, about all these dreaming abilities, which you see so much in the ancient city of Tula and some of these places.
Where we visited a number of times with him and Carol Tiggs.
Totally, exactly. So it's, and the stories of Quetzalcoatl as a god, he's always helping mankind. He was one of the gods that made the bones and the body of mankind. So it's kind of like he imbued in us our ability to become him, which is amazing.
The plumed serpent, all myths are metaphors and show us how to live. And there's such stunning poetry to the myth of flight, of transformation. And I was talking with Rennie earlier about this, the idea that this is a last tour, while it is imbued with the sadness that those words, the last tour, which is dramatic to me and which I like. There's also the idea of cyclicity and change. One of the things Carlos Castaneda taught us was that if one falls during the day, one picks oneself up as quickly as one can. That's warriorship, and that is a very sober response to the nature of this life, which is unknowable and filled with movement and the unexpected. So the idea that of the Chocmules gazing at one another from 1,000 miles away, and ourselves picking ourselves up and experiencing change in a way that enhances flight and dreaming is one of the most essential things that Carlos Castaneda taught. So we need to embrace this notion of ourselves as shedding the ballast or the trappings of ego, which allows flight. One of the things that you and I have talked about was how we retain things in the body.
Totally.
So on this trip, seeing these powerful, energetic objects and experiencing that mood, these are things that the body energetically will retain forever.
Exactly, forever. And I'm glad you brought that point up, because as this is the last tour, and when you're where we have designed this tour is we're going to see some more sites. We're going to see Palenque and a couple more places, Yachalan, etc. But we're going to end up with the OLMEC. This is where the beginning of the plumed serpent, the myth, the stories, the reverence, the transformation of humanity began. And we're all going to go to a museum, and in that museum you will see the how do you say it? The plumed serpent represented in the Toltec tradition, in the Teotihuacan tradition, in the Mayan tradition, and then in the Olmec tradition. And there's something about having all of that in one location. And in a minute, in this second, you realize you can see the full panorama of the tradition, how it has changed, how it has mutated, how the constancy of the Plumed Serpent myth has been through. And what you get that viscerally.
Mm-hmm.
When it affected me, it just went right into like my heart space. And I finally knew why I was on this path, which was, I had not expected to experience that at all. But for me, it's like, there's no place else for me to be. It's one of those Zen sayings, why are you here? There's no place else to be.
Yeah. Carlos Castaneda used to have this quote where he would say, for a few moments, anthropology was forgotten.
Yeah.
And I think on this tour, one tries to distract the mind, put the mind over here, while one absorbs the energetic and cyclical history of what one is encountering. It does something to the energy body. It does something to oneself. It facilitates transformation. So I'm really, really excited and moved. There's something very poignant about a last tour that's echoed in Carlos Castaneda's books. This is certainly not an ending, this tour, but a kind of leaping into something else.
Well, and just what's also interesting is that this tour began as a dream. It began as an idea, and then it became flesh. It became manifest. It became grounded, and then it's going to take flight again. At the end of this tour.
Put your feathers on.
Put your feathers on. That's right.
Put your feathers on and dream.
Yeah.
There's a T-shirt.
Yeah, really. But the other thing too is, like you were alluding to, is when you go on this tour, you will leave with something that will be with you forever. It never goes.
Yeah.
And
that's an idea of the mind that I must retain everything and write everything down. In Carlos Castaneda's books, and a very, very constant and recurrent theme is that so many of the things he saw and was shown, he retrieved at later times, whether it was a week later or 10 years later. They stayed embedded.
Because all of our life experiences are here, positive or negative, and you get to a place that they come out again. When you're, like you said earlier, you align yourself. They come out again. So, well, I'm very excited going. I'm going to be there.
I'm going to try to be there, try my best. At this time, it's impossible for me to say. But there was something that Carlos used to say when he went to Mexico, and we didn't for some reason.
That's right. And he would call me on the phone if I was going to stay in Los Angeles. He goes, Tola, he goes, I carry you in my pocket. Don't ever forget that. So, Bruce, I carry you in my pocket. And
in many ways, Mexico has carried Rennie and I in her pocket for forever.
Totally. So anyway,
we like being in the pocket.
We like being in the pocket.
We like being taken out of the pocket.
Yeah, totally. Woo! Dust you off. Yeah, totally. So anyway,
when is the tour?
It's April the 18th through the 25th. It's a little longer. It's 8 days.
Wow.
And, because we're going into some very remote areas. We're canoeing. We're backpacking.
Wow.
Because the places that are still intact are away from civilization.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
So
it's going to be an adventure.
It's going to be an adventure. This is a very adventuresome one. Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally. So click the button below and sign up, and we'll see you there. Bye. Ciao.